How did you go from picking and packing on the shop floor to leading CI?
Make sure you've got a mentor behind you, as I did.
Tell us about that. How did that move come about and what do Logic Ticks do?
Reflect, take time to reflect. After each week, what the solution is depends on the size of the business and what the size of the problem is.
What you put in is what you get out.
Even if a company says that is our baseline, I will do a sense check.
Probably a lot of supply chain leaders out there that are having a similar conversation with their teams around AI.
I've been on a hell of a journey and a very memorable journey.
Welcome to Stacked and Loaded. Today we're joined by Steve Cowley. Steve comes from a background of unloading trucks to transforming logistics strategies through continuous improvement. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt.
So, where did it all begin? 20 years worth of experience in logistics. I'm sure you've seen, a lot in your time. Where did you start? How did you go from picking and packing on the shop floor to leading CI?
So originally, when to go back a little bit further afield, prior to the logistics piece, I was in a couple of weird and wonderful jobs there by first of all selling English and British esoteric hi-fi stuff and repairing that, then moving into quite a number of years for selling reprographic equipment to companies and local authorities. Did that for quite a few years, but ended up getting a little bit despondent with the changes in commission packages, and the ability to make money became less and less. So I wanted a change. I saw an opportunity going back sort of exactly 20 years, or just over 20 years now, to Asda George in Newcastle-under-Lyme in Staffordshire, where I currently live. And that was a great opportunity. Joined picking as a picker, and you're correct, unloading and loading trailers.
Was that as an agency member of staff? Was that fixed term or was it just permanent then?
It was a permanent position with Asda. So, with a lot of progression. I knew a couple of people that had moved into that line of work as well. I'd heard good stories about career progression and some possibilities of future progression within logistics, not specifically Asda, but logistics as a wider employer and market. I was only there for a short period and then moved into being a trainer, which I was very proud of because then I became a bit more of a trusted member, and then to a team leader position, which is where I cut my teeth really in leading people, albeit small numbers of people at that point, round about teams of 20s and 30s, but throughout different areas of that function. Wasn't unhappy at Asda at all, but a great position came up whereby I didn't look back then for the next sort of 17 and a half, 18 years, whereby a major retailer with a company originally dating back was Christian Salverson. So I joined there as a data entry clerk. And again, the reason for that move was I saw it was a larger 3PL. I saw a 3PL with a huge number of customers, so that to me was a number of opportunities that I didn't have within Asda as being the main sort of manufacturer and sole trader of that product. I quickly then, it was recognised by one of the HR managers at that point that I had a little bit about me, so she said, a lady called Helen, and suggested would I be interested in a management position on night shift on a number of functions, again, picking, packing, dispatch. So absolutely jumped at the chance. And then for the next few years, didn't really look back. So that's the sort of it in a nutshell, but obviously there's some other movements within that period.
So if we take it back to the change before you moved to Asda, I think it's a really interesting point, isn't it? Within supply chain and logistics, you don't get many people that come from university with this big ambition or this big drive to go into supply chain and logistics. They just kind of find themselves falling into those roles. What do you think it was about yourself, or what do you think other people have within them that makes them succeed within supply chain and logistics?
I think the best way to answer that is the previous jobs that I had, and certainly within sales, that was a good grounding of you need to be able to talk to people, communicate with people, not only one way, it needs to be a two-way conversation and be a good listener. What I quickly found within logistics was that if you were talking to the team and you were listening to the team, you built a bed of trust very, very quickly. There aren't Not everybody is gifted with that, but I certainly felt that I was, and it was my management team at the time and my line managers at the time that saw that I had that and wanted to build upon that. Hence, they gave me the opportunity to grow, and certainly that is proof within the Christian Salverson and my onward journey through to the other 3PLs from Christian Salverson.
So if you could pick one moment in that period of time, what was that specific moment that made you make that jump into management and go, right, I'm going to take a step here, I'm going to develop, I'm going to sort of progress my career and start managing a team of people? Was it a person that drove you to that, a mentor, someone specific?
Certainly within that world, absolutely. There were two line managers on different shifts. But I'd seen them and heard their stories where they had also grown from pickers and packers through the ranks up to sort of shift operations. I really wanted part of that. I asked them, could you help me? Could you mentor me? Could you steer me in the right direction? So, there's a couple of people there. One called Paul, specifically remember. He gave me quite a hard time in certain situations, but he did it for the right reasons. And I learned some serious lessons on how then to progress. And that was my next step, whereby my interviews then came pretty quickly with Paul, strangely enough, for the shift operations role, which I was successful in.
And how long did it take you to gain their trust, like prove yourself and really show what Steve was capable of?
It was quite a short period of time because we're talking 6 to 9 months. I got my head down. I proved that I wanted to be there and that I wanted to make a change. And they could see quite cleanly that I had that tenacity to see the job through. And also from a point of view that I didn't get flustered when there were problems. And I had a bit of an analytical mind even back then, even though I was still relatively new to logistics, that I could apply that. It was really that specific time that, a short period of time, sorry, that I was promoted, and very proud of that moment.
And did you ever get to a point in your career where you thought, right, I want to take another step change now. I want to develop myself, and you went to look for a mentor? Did you reach outside of the business, or was that just internal, or have you never had a mentor yourself to sort of help you, guide you, and support you through tough times and good times?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I progressed for around about 7 years within the shift operations role, I hadn't then moved over to CI, but was getting a better knowledge of CI, and certainly in the unit that I was working in, that one lady in particular, a lady called Sarah, took me under her wing. I asked what was a natural progression. She was very keen to see me in CI further down the road. I wanted to know more. So it was Sarah really that put her whole trust into me, gave me a wider audience, began to take me to more customer-facing meetings and Teams calls and all sorts of stuff that gave me a greater insight into what the customer wanted, rather than it being fed down from sort of like my line management. So it was absolutely Sarah putting that trust and driving me forward that gave me the hunger that I then wanted to move into CI. And the attraction of CI really was the diversity within CI of the tools and the techniques that can be used, that need to be used. And the sole one, really, the sole driver for me is making a change, seeing a change. Yes, it can often be about cash and benefit there, or improvement in KPIs, but absolutely service, but also making the job easier for the people that I was working with and around. And that's magic to have people. It's quite a sweet thing to happen, is that people come to you and go, thank you for making that change. I've now, my job's less walking, my job's less pushing, and became easier, and that's reward itself.
And I think pride often gets in the way, doesn't it, sometimes, of people reaching out, and I suppose it's showing a level of vulnerability to say, actually, I could do with your support, whether that's in my career, whether it's in my personal life, to help me push on. And I think some people are against doing that, aren't they? And, they want to show that they can do everything and be all things to all people, whereas actually there's nothing wrong with going, can you help? I need help. I need development. I'm not the end result yet. I still want to develop myself and learn more. Who can I reach out to help me with that? And I think that holds a lot of people back in their careers, is that unwillingness to go help.
You're absolutely right, and I don't mind admitting it that I didn't have all the answers, and it was absolutely, referencing Sarah again as a serious mentor in my career, who helped me for many years. Was that I often went to her and said, I don't have the answers. What do I do? How do I do it? Who do I need to talk to? Who are the stakeholders? And because I was asking the question, she was grateful that I wasn't hiding, under a bushel and fearing away from a problem. I was facing it head on and asking the right questions. So again, that was very much a two-way thing. So back to communication and back to people work for people and people talk to people. And yeah.
So if there's one story you could tell us, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. If there's one story you could tell us from on the shop floor in those days when you were making that step and you were put into a situation where it was incredibly unfamiliar to you and you weren't really sure what the answer was, what would that situation be?
That's an interesting one. Absolutely, I can reference back to a project that I was closely involved with a team, and it involved robots of all things, AMRs, into a warehouse. The business case was all done, everything was all sweet, it was looking like it was going to work. But we did have, when we ever talk about robots, or in certain instances, people can get a little bit fearful that, is it my role that's going to be taken away by some piece of machinery? Absolutely, that wasn't the case. This was about bringing in robots to, yes, make the picking efficiency better and improve the productivity, but it was also about removing a lot of the manual work from the pickers. So we had a bit of a problem with the pickers themselves at that point, and there was a little bit of fear and animosity. So I wasn't particularly sure how best to approach that. Yes, there were certain personalities within that group of people I could simply have a one-to-one with, but then there were others that were a little bit more fearful than the rest. Again, back to Sarah. It was Sarah that suggested that we get the people into the room, show them videos of what these robots are, what they do, have a look at some previous implementations, and so then watch the feedback from the colleagues of those previous employments across Europe and the rest of the world. And it was that really that I hadn't thought of. I thought I could do it just with communications and briefs. So again, another lesson learned: engage the people, but there are different ways to do it. There isn't always one silver bullet to answer a question.
I think that's a really good point, picking up on that journey and the journey you take your team through and the people around you, because AI, I mean, there's no hiding the fact that the same conversations that you were probably having about automation, there's probably a lot of supply chain leaders out there that are having a similar conversation with their teams around AI and trying to support the teams and sort of get rid of any nervousness around the fact that, we're going to bring a platform in that could remove jobs from the business. And there's mixed views, isn't there, out there around AI and its benefits and what it's actually going to do in the future, and whether that future is within 5 years' time, whether it's within 10 years' time. So I think that's quite a prominent point and probably a talking point that a lot of people are going to be revisiting very soon, if not already. Probably, as we speak, people will be having those debates.
And it's very much so, and it's one because of that lesson learnt. It's one that I always, if we are talking about some tech and innovation, AMRs or the AI that you referenced there, whatever the connotation may be, it's always now that I'll sit back and I'll think and I'll have a bit of self-reflection into, okay, who are the key stakeholders? Who are we talking to? Do we need to convince? Who are the people that could potentially fear the change? How can we put our arms around them? What are the CI tools and techniques, of which there's a myriad of, that we can use to achieve that and alleviate, where possible and as best as possible, that nervousness and that fear factor?
So CI is often talked about. I mean, the environment that we work in naturally within supply chain it's a moving environment. It's volatile, incredibly volatile for retailers. So continuous improvement, efficiencies, cost savings is something that's always at the forefront of people's minds. It's talked about, but not always understood. How do you go about making people understand what CI is and the right approach to taking that? Because you've clearly done that a hell of a lot with your time at GXO, and I was fortunate enough to work with yourself at Ted Baker, and you did a great job with us on CI. So yeah, how does that look for you?
You're right. Often people consider whether it be Lean Six Sigma, which sits within the CI methodology, or Prince 2, whatever it may be, which I know is more projects, but there's definitely crossover there, is that it can sometimes be considered a bit of a dark art. But there's a beautiful thing within CI and the metric, sorry, the methodology. The core baseline is the DMAIC principle. I absolutely, going to sound a bit dull here, but I live my life by the DMAIC rule and approach, which is always to approach it the same way with a standardized approach of defining the problem, measuring the problem, analysing the problem to find out what's it costing the business, what's it costing the company, whether that be time or cash or any other metric, and then move on to improve with the ideas generation. And that's a great way of engaging with anybody that's unaware. It's such an easy step. And once you can explain that those are the steps that were going to be taken, and you're strict and you follow those down on the shop floor or wherever the environment may be, that absolutely is my approach. It's worked for me for many years. There are a couple of business units I've been involved in whereby I've used exactly the same approach and it absolutely works. So it's great, and I'm very proud that I can now look back on. Part of my legacy is that, if I was returned back in the TARDIS, is that people are still using that DMAIC methodology, are still following that process, and it works and it's proven. And I won't deviate from that unless something magical comes along, but I don't think it's over the horizon just yet.
Can you overcomplicate it?
I think you can. There are possibilities where you can, but that's where sort of like the education. There are many sort of qualifications you can get within the CI world, and certainly Lean Six Sigma. So without the core knowledge of that DMAIC process or some sort of basic understanding of project management, absolutely you can tie yourself up in knots. The biggest problem that I've found is that it falls down on the measure phase. Because if you haven't measured it and you haven't got a baseline, one, it's going to be difficult to improve because there's nothing to revert back to say that was our step, our start point, and our step change is now this. So absolutely, it's you can overcomplicate it, but if you stick to it and have somebody such as a mentor like myself, who's now black belt accredited and have been for a number of years, is that I can always steer people back in. But I do find that the tripping point can sometimes be that measure. And I'll always revert back until we've got that baseline, we can't continue. So it's not necessarily overcomplicating, it's missing that stage, which then doesn't allow you to complete the rest of the stages.
So that baseline's super interesting, I think, because so many businesses that I've seen don't have a great baseline, normally because the data that's within the systems has never seen any housekeeping. It's dirty data, it's poor data, and it's like anything, what you put in is what you get out. So to measure a consistent baseline is quite tricky, and I think a number of companies will struggle with that. How do you deal with going into a business, looking at an operation and finding that either there is no baseline or you really struggle to get an accurate baseline that you've got confidence in, you've got trust in, that then you could play back to a stakeholder and say, here, this is where we started, this is what we think we can deliver, and this is what we have delivered?
I will always be open and honest. If there's no baseline there, then it needs to be measured. And we've got the tools and techniques within our CI toolbox, and that might be a sort of value stream mapping exercise whereby it's done on a stopwatch, or a bit more intricate and more scientific with single minute value studies. So we're in with a tech time board. I know that's old school, we do it on tablets nowadays, but the idea is exactly the same. So we then can establish, well, actually you didn't know, but this is your starting point. Where do you want to be? Is it 10%, 5%, whatever it may be. But even if, and again, open and honest, even if a company says that that is our baseline, I will do a sense check because I need to understand that, are we going to be comparing eggs with eggs? There are some watch outs, you've exactly highlighted it there. It depends on what their potential WMS is kicking out, what hours have been recorded on the shop floor, what's murking the waters. Is the recording of hours that are going into the WMS to ping out a productivity report, are they accurate? And is it consistent throughout shift on shift and week on week? Which is why I would still like to go in, and that's where our CI skills come in, to absolutely validate that baseline. And I'm not shy in saying, well, I accept, Mr. Customer, that you're saying it's X. However, I disagree. I believe it's this for these reasons. And I think that's a really healthy conversation.
How do you scale that mindset? So you'll go into an environment where people have got certain views, people have worked there for a period of time. They might be against change. You might have some people that are set to change and can't wait for a fresh set of eyes to come in, have a look at a problem, and then collectively try and solve it together. How do you scale the mindset of everybody together and try and bring them onto a level playing field and get everyone pointing in the same direction? Because I've found that could be quite tricky over many years, different operations. You're always going to come across different people because everybody's different, and the world would be a boring place if we weren't. But that comes with its challenges, doesn't it?
I think the two elements to answer your question around people maybe not joining the journey is the piece around, well, we've always done it like this. Why should we change? It's been working for many a month, many a year. And we'll always face that. I do go back to part of overcoming that is to share again and talk through and allow them into the science. Not only what are the results, but how were the studies done? How was it timed? What was the physical approach and the process of doing the timings? So at least then they can get a better understanding and hopefully overcome that. Another way that I've overcome it in the past and will continue to do so in the future is absolutely allow them to do the timing study with me, so we can do it together. And I think that's a wonderful way. You're investing your own time again, but that's a great way of involving people. And they're in then, and they're hooked.
Yeah, they're on the hook.
Yes.
I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors today, Logic Ticks. For more details, please see below. Black belt then. I would love to know more about your black belt journey. You mentioned it earlier on. What made you go for black belt? What did that journey look like? I think there's a lot of people out there that would love to go on the Six Sigma journey and to become accredited with the black belt. So what did that look like for you?
So earlier on within my CI career, I'd done the lower belts. Black belt was always in the back of my mind. I knew it was a big step because it's quite an intense course. There's a lot to it. It is absolutely the epitome of the Lean Six Sigma measurement, dating back to who knows when, back to the Japanese Toyota methodology. So it was always in the back of my mind. It was offered. And the reason I took it is quite simple. I'd already got credibility from my line managers and from the people I was working with and for and around. But I wanted more. I wanted a bit more credibility, that when I was talking at a more granular level, in particular around the science, SMVs as an example, and the science of productivity and how we can implement change on that and maintain it, is that it was black belt that would give me those extended tools and techniques. So it extended my wealth, my knowledge, and gave me a wealth. It was tough, it was intense, it nearly broke me. So it was quite intense, with an intense accreditation exam at the end. But over the line, I'm incredibly proud of that. I use the tools and techniques every time I approach or walk into a warehouse or a process environment situation where I'm looking at it. So I would recommend it to anybody, but what I would strongly suggest is that you do the lower core belts first as an introduction, otherwise you could sink.
And what's the one, on top of that advice, what's the one thing you would say to people around their support network that they need to have around them, to support them getting accredited with black belt? You know, we've all got families, we've all got colleagues around us that are part of our support structure, big or small. What does someone need? If someone's out there looking to take the black belt, what does someone need to have to get the best out of that course?
What works really well for me, and I would strongly suggest this, apart from friends and family, obviously, that are always kindly there for you, is your fellow students. On my course, there were 5 other people, and we became the best of friends quite quickly as the course went on. Forever emailing, forever texting, asking advice. support groups at the weekend to talk through specifics that we weren't sure of and help others through. So it was very much a two-way street. I would absolutely recommend that you put up arm in arm with your fellow students and you see it through as a group rather than individual. Over and above that, I'll revert back to Sarah. I had a great sounding board there who had also done that course and was always there for me if I ever had a bit of a head scratching moment.
People often say, don't they, that logistics is more of a lifestyle than it is a career choice, and that support network is absolutely key. What did you have in your personal life that helped you and supported you along your career from the last 20 years, really?
Always had good friends and family around me. In particular, a couple of friends that are already or were already in logistics and still are. Different companies, but they were always there as a sounding board. You're right. It isn't. It's not a 9 to 5 job. It's invariably not a Monday to a Friday job. There's weekend work. There's late hours in there, especially if you've got operational issues. It become quite fun and feisty. But again, it's a mentor. Make sure you've got a mentor behind you, as I did, and good friends and family. Hopefully that we're in the same industry, but also take time out. One for me, and this is a recommendation from Sarah that I live by, which was reflect. Take time to reflect after each week, or or couple of weeks. Is sit back, take half an hour, and have a deep dive into what have I done, what have I achieved, what went well, what didn't go well, and work on those going forward. So it's tough sometimes trying to hit that work-life balance piece and level. So I haven't got a magic answer for that. But what I will say is that it's a rewarding career. You get out what you put in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I've got, various hobbies, which is what I call my downtime, whether that's motorcycle racing, or sports. What's downtime look like for you? What do you do in your spare time, and what do you enjoy?
So yeah, there's a bit of sports in there. There's a snooker and darts. It's nothing too
Yeah.
strenuous, I'm afraid. But I'm very lucky to have a 17-year-old son who likes exactly the same music as me. And music has been a big part of my life since the age of, I don't know, 6. So we tend to go to a lot of gigs, and I've been privileged to have seen some quite monumental people, certainly over the past 12 months and 2 and 3 years with him, and great memories. Dave Gilmour from Pink Floyd, the 1975. I've got the Fontaines DC coming up, where I think I'll be the oldest person in the audience, but anyway, I'll tolerate it. But yeah, many others, Billy Joel and Peter Gabriel. So I've been on a hell of a journey with, and a very memorable journey with my 17-year-old son. So I'm really lucky to have him.
So if you could go back and do it all over again, what would you do differently? And would you balance your personal life balance differently to your work life balance, or would you do it the same all over again?
I think there'd be some tweaks. I don't think too much of a alteration to the work-life balance. As I say, I'm a true believer in you get out what you put in, and I'm pleased with the level of input that I've put in, and I've got enough friends and family around me, and certainly have over the past few years, to support me through any of those more challenging times. If I were to do things slightly differently, I would have wished that I have learned some of those lessons around baselines and putting my arm around people earlier, rather than waiting to sort of like into a CI career. I think I could have achieved more earlier. Is really the key for me, and absolutely nailing the communication and the people element. Is absolutely massive for me. So if I could learn the lessons that I've learned earlier, that's my key takeaway.
Great. What's next for Steve then? You had your time at GXO, you've moved on from GXO now, you've been away for what I think is around 4 months. You're now a senior supply chain consultant at a company called Logitix. Tell us about that. How did that move come about, and what do Logitix do?
I was aware of Logitix anyway, even within my time at GXO. It was a good friend that had suggested that you reach out. I'm glad I did, so I've done that now, and I am now a consultant, CI consultant for Logitix moving forward. So that's the next step for Steve Cowley. Logitix are a logistics consultancy firm, so offering a number of products. The one that I will be closely involved in will be health checks. So end-to-end health checks, what's going well, what isn't going so well, what's hurting companies out there, and using those CI tools and techniques to identify those areas of improvement. It's going to be great to get back into these warehouses, these sites, and these businesses and help and assist them realise what potential Logitech can bring.
With the retailers that you've seen since your time at Logitech and the health checks that you've done, previously we had a guest on, David Emerson. He stated that supply chain is probably one of the most disruptive industries to be in, and one of the most disruptive environments to be part of. Is there one common problem, one common issue you see when going into the retailers doing the health checks that you think could be fixed across the board? Or as you go in, is everybody different, everybody's got their own challenges, or is it pretty consistent across the industry?
There is a myriad of problems and different solutions tailored and fit to try and answer those questions. What I would say is that you're right, logistics is disruptive, certainly within the retail sector. One of the biggest problems with that disruption is that when volumes are not there, how does a logistics environment flex? And that can always mean that there's an element, if not reacted to quick enough, there's an element of waste. And obviously there comes the extra cost, and it's wasted cost. So there's a common theme without a doubt. What the solution is depends on the size of the business and what the size of the problem is.
What kind of businesses benefit from Logitech's services? So you're going in giving health checks. Is it just for smaller retailers who don't have logistics teams currently and can't afford a full supply chain team? Or is it the big enterprise corporate customers that benefit the most?
Quite an easy question to answer. All businesses can benefit for what Logitechs are providing. The fact that they'll be entering into your site, into your business, into your environment and your pastures to identify potential waste, cost saving areas from end to end, whether that be within the warehouse operations, whether that be a WMS implementation, whether that be tech and innovation solutions, whether that be final mile, wider transport issues. Absolute end-to-end Logitechs are looking at that as to where they will provide benefit.
And does Logitech have a sort of ray of experience amongst the team that work there? I've never worked with Logitech directly within a retailer. So have they got people that look after final mile for you, freight, or is it one person that looks after everything, or can they pull on all sorts of resource?
There are subject matter experts within Logitech that can immediately answer some of your questions regarding final mile, quote parcel, or the warehouse environments, WMS, etc. But over 70 years experience within Logitech tells you that there's also many strands that they can pull on, and many other environments to ask for support if needed to bring in those solutions required for your business.
So you've seen a lot of broken processes, I imagine, from across your 20-year career. What's the first thing you look for when you go into a company, and what does that health check, as you've called it, what does that look like?
The health check, without going into too much detail and a step-by-step process, it's an eyeball of the process. The first point of call is an eyeball across the end-to-end warehouse and identifying waste. It's always key to identify those pockets of waste, which are obviously costing companies money. Is the WMS providing the speed of service that it should? Is the ordering profile correct? Have we got people standing around waiting for those inbound trailers? People have been planned in, but the inbound is not matching the planning model. Dispatch trailers waiting to be loaded, trailers half loaded, final mile not being on time, not pleasing the customer. So it's initially around the waste. Once we've identified those pockets of waste, we can get into the science of what's it costing you, and then Logitech can then provide those solutions to remove those painful wounds within your business.
What's the biggest mistake you see most logistics managers making today?
There's a great number. There isn't just one, two, or three. There's some quite common themes of productivities not being managed effectively, differences, no lack of standardisation across shift to shift, hours being recorded differently, processes not being followed, whether that's SOP, standard operating procedure, be even the same from shift to shift. So there are differences there. But they're also working in their areas, not with their eyes wide open sometimes. That our modern day logistics manager can be can't see the wood for the trees because they're really in the firing line and in the mix and on the dance floor really, and just get the stock out as quickly as possible can sometimes be the message. But this is where then we're sending out equipment which is not full. So we're sending cages and pallets and store trays that are 20-30% full. As an example there, I've lost count of the amount of times that we've gone into sites and said, let's talk about multi-store picking. Let's group some stores together, increase that fill, and have one person picking the whole order of 3 to 4, 6 stores, whatever the connotation may be. Most WMSs are configured to do that anyway, so that improves transport costs as well. So that's a great end-to-end starter. Silly stuff such as consumables. Again, lost count of how many times I've gone in, and nobody really is focused on what are we paying for the consumables. Is it the right type of consumable? Examples of going into sites and saving between 80 and 100 grand or more simply on shrink wrap. It can be quite amazing. Reducing damages as well, certainly within the food industry, making sure you got the configuration on a pallet and the pallet is built right and safe, absolutely drives down damages. So when we're talking about foods and in particular breakables of bottles, etc., and eggs and the delicate stuff, can absolutely save hundreds of thousands of pounds around a grocery network. So an absolute myriad of stuff. I can give you far more examples and keep on going.
If I'm a small retailer, SME, trying to grow my business, very entrepreneurial, how do I make sure I embed a CI culture from the word go? Too often you go into larger companies who have seen and experienced hyper growth, specifically retailers is probably a good example. And then as the curve changes and the environment around them changes, you really start to see sort of what their foundations look like. And it's very common that they've not embedded that CI approach from the word go because they've just been trying to keep up with their growth, which is good, but proves challenging later down the line. So how do you embed that from the word go, do you think?
I'm going to sound a bit like a bit of a repeated record here, but it's back to the standardisation. It's sticking to one methodology. I'm back to the DMAIC process. It's about ensuring that there are people or person that is accountable for CI. We make sure that CI is absolutely part of the daily huddle, the start of every shift meeting. What are we doing for CI? What's our CI target? What did we achieve last week? What are we planning to do for next week and the rest of the month? Make sure that everybody's on board, aware that it's part of managers' objectives. Number of things you can do to absolutely embed it. Make sure that success is also celebrated. X amount of initiatives implemented, this month in July or wherever it may be, and celebrate and reward those colleagues if the ideas have come from the colleagues. Have a colleague suggestion format, whether that be an ideas generation mailbox or a CI forum on site, and get those guys regularly together, because what CI has taught me is that it's the people on the shop floor. They're the SMEs, they're the guys doing the job, and those are the guys that have got the idea. And to finish off, to absolutely give people autonomy to do that on their own. And what I found is people that have been a little bit scared of, again, this dark art that's CI or Lean Six Sigma, if they've run through one project and they've seen it succeed by following the proper process and that standardised approach, the second and third comes easy, and they've got the hunger, they've got the bug.
I'm a small retailer. I can't afford a big supply chain team. I can't afford an individual within that team to be specifically focused on CI. How do I make sure I'm still including it in everything that I do, and how do I get that support in?
And Logic takes the company to provide those solutions that will be affordable, bespoke to your specific business, maintainable and scalable.
So, Steve, are you mentoring the next generation of supply chain leaders? Have you got anyone under your wings at the moment that you're supporting in their career and giving something back outside of Logitech's?
There are always people that we meet throughout our careers. So yeah, I've got many sort of colleagues and ex-colleagues out there that I would like to uh, sort of reconnect with and rejoin. I think they would be great future consultants within a consultancy team for Logitechs, and that for me is the future growth as Logitechs gets bigger and brighter.
What still gets you excited about logistics? What keeps you going? You've obviously now come on board with Logitechs. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
People. It's absolutely the people. Yes, it's a great feeling of walking into a site, identifying areas of concern, and offering up those solutions and seeing that happen and touch and feeling that as it happens. But absolutely, it's the people that I've met over the years and over the next few years working with Logitechs that drives me on.
Brilliant. Well, we have a tradition at Stacked and Loaded, Steve, of a quick fire round of questions. It's been brilliant to get your insight on CI and the history over, well, your career history over the last 20 years. So if you don't mind, I'm going to fire a few questions at you and we shall see what your answers are. So first one, CI methodology or gut instinct?
Both. And you know you're going to say I can only choose the one. So if I had to sway to the one, it would have to be the methodology. It has to be that standardization. Yes, I've got gut feel always when I walk into a site. We all have, the Logitechs, the 70 years plus of experience, we've all got that gut feel. But I've already said numerous times, if we can't measure it and we can't offer that baseline, it's the CI methodology that is king for me.
Yeah. Whiteboards or blackboards?
Whiteboards. Whiteboards, post-it notes, love an idea, CI ideas generation with the SMEs, the people off the shop floor, yellow post-it notes all over, and some real gems come forward through those.
Work boots or boardroom?
Work boots, on the shop floor, doing the dance, in the mix.
One person in your career that changed your life?
Back to Sarah, absolute um, mentor, yeah, true mentor, still with me, and I can still hear all of her advice, so absolutely.
One lesson logistics taught you the hard way?
You always have to be absolutely on your toes because no day is ever the same. Shift by shift is different. Every day is different.
Cider or lager?
Lager.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I think Steve is a clear example of resilience within the supply chain, and CI truly starts with the people first. Steve shows how you can pivot from being on the shop floor to moving into consultancy and leading and teaching the next generation. As you guys will know, Logitechs are a sponsor of this podcast. To find out more information on Logitechs, please click the link below. Thanks for tuning in to Stacked and Loaded. Keep stacking, keep loading.